and welcome to Third Eye Thinkers. I'm your host, Megan Benanti.
And I'm Michelle Welch.
And today we're going to talk about protection and how to help protect yourself in the spirit world and when you're connecting with your guides.
Yeah. So we were talking about topics, actually, and there are so many to choose from. So we kind of started talking about the things that come up most with clients, or actually clients and also in my store, Soultopia. Yeah. So I was mentioning to you, actually, Megan, that probably one of the biggest questions we get in Soultopia, literally, I'd say many times a day, is the question about how to protect against certain things in the spirit world. So maybe we should start just explaining a little bit about what we mean by protection.
Okay. Well, to me, one of the big things with protection is going to be just having good, healthy boundaries. And in general, I sort of set myself up energetically on a daily basis so that I don't have a lot of anything kind of broken down. But there's a lot of traditional methods that you can do to help protect yourself, and we'll talk about some of those. Do you have like a basic regime you do in the morning or during the day that help you to kind of protect?
I do. Well, let me say this. I've gone through a myriad of different routines. So the answer is yes, but it's evolved.
Okay, good.
So I've done everything, which I will talk about, but from, putting protection around myself, a bubble or a hedge of protection, or, a lot of visualization, to I've come around and using a bunch of tools, because I've said before I like using different tools such as crystals and things like that.
Right.
But and then I've kind of come to the conclusion that I also believe in just raising my vibration. And the light that I have as much as I can, because I believe that love and light will overcome anything that's coming at me.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that too, and I'd like to get into that as soon as possible, because we've talked about that a lot this week, how sometimes there are things that come out at us, especially when we're doing this type of work, or anybody, when we're dealing with anything. I always pick on certain stores, but when we're going in stores, or I'll use even a pawn shop, okay? I'll send a lot of my students to pawn shops to practice, holding things or touching things where you feel a lot of energy. And it's a lot of discouraging or maybe desperate energy sometimes, because people are getting rid of things because they need money. And so they may pick up on it, on certain energy. And they may not even know why. So a lot of times that's a great place to learn to protect your energy is going in those places. For one thing, I think that what we don't always realize is that we are always in each other's auric fields. Like right now, we are in each other, our heart fields are in connection, and probably our brains. Okay, but heart auric fields go out really far, and depending on the person, they go out, like the Dalai Lama's, I've said, his goes out really far, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and our brain auras go out very far. So when people think, I don't want to hug somebody because I might get in their space, well, we're already in their space because we're in each other's auric fields. So to answer your question, yes, I do protect sometimes, and I say prayers of protection and call on Archangel Michael for protection, but sometimes I forget. And when I forget, sometimes I realize I forgot. How about you?
Well, I think I'd start off my day and my life so energetically high that it's, I don't have to get into specific prayers all the time. Although it is kind of interesting because coincidentally, I live right down the street from St. Michael's Drive. And one of my Catholic neighbors was saying, she said, part of the reason I loved living here is because St. Michael is right down the road.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, just because I'm working at such a high level, I generally don't just draw in things that I don't want around me. And I recently, in the last few weeks, have had some experiences, and I was like, holy cow, my protection was completely violated. And I had to figure out how do I deal with that? And who do I talk to about it? Because when you're dealing with spirituality and people's energetic vibrations, that's not something that everybody's open to. And especially when you're talking about things like dark energy, it's like, oh my gosh, who am I going to tell? And because you don't want to have people pass judgment. You don't want to feel like a failure because you can't manage this on your own. And so that was kind of a new experience for me. Before we get into the stories, though, do you want to talk about what the tools that we brought this week?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I brought, for me, again, there's so many crystals. Every week I will say this, there's crystals for, you have to kind of work with the crystals and touch the crystals and hold them yourself, but there's always some go-to crystals for the major topics. And definitely for protection, there's a go-to crystal, and it's called black tourmaline. And I believe we have a graphic of that to show for those of you that are watching, but I will describe it for those of you that are just listening. It is a black. Now, tourmaline comes in different colors, but so when it's black tourmaline, it's called schorl. It's SCHORL. If it's in different colors, they have a different name for it, but we just call it black tourmaline, to not be all fancy about it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful crystal. It comes in a tumbled form too. And I use the word crystal loosely, okay? Crystal stone, that's like a class, okay? We won't get into all that. But the great thing about black tourmaline is not only does it ward off negativity, it actually will absorb it and deflect it. So deflect it and absorb it, either one. So I recommend putting it at your front door, putting it in an office, if there's some unpleasantness in an office, putting it at the front door of your home, wearing it. I have it on my ring. I usually wear it, maybe on a pendant. Here's a pendant that's set in sterling silver with a labradorite on top. Yeah, I usually wear it in bracelets. Energy doesn't disappear. So that's what energy, you can get it to go somewhere, but it's always going to go somewhere else, right? So it's funny to me when I see healers snapping their fingers. They'll snap their fingers like they're snapping energy onto the floor when they're clearing you, or they're like brushing their hands like they're clearing it. And first of all, I think that's kind of rude. When they do that to me, I'm like, what? I'm that bad? So I don't, and no offense to those who do that. I recognize that's a method and process that's taught. But have you ever seen they'll snap their fingers?
Yep.
And what I think they're doing, and I don't know what they're doing in their head, so I can't judge what they're doing, but they're snapping energy onto the floor unless they're sending it somewhere. So black tourmaline will take that and recycle it for good. So will Gaia, the Mother Earth, will recycle that energy for good, or if you send it to the light. But when you're just snapping your fingers, you're sending it to the floor because energy goes somewhere.
Right. Well, and energetically, they're probably sending it back to
they probably
Mother
are.
Earth.
Probably are, unless they're just snapping their fingers. So, no judgment. I just think it's funny. I want to always go, where are you sending that energy?
That is funny.
Yeah, so it's just kind of interesting. But black tourmaline is a perfect one to deflect, absorb, transmute the energy.
Perfect. Well, and I brought in mugwort today, and
Love it.
yeah, so that's up on the screen, and this is the herbal form, which is also on the left side on the screen. And mugwort, the Latin term's Artemisia vulgaris, and so a lot of, here in Texas, we can grow Artemisia in our yard quite easily. I don't actually have any mugwort growing, and I haven't seen it in the nursery, so I don't know if our soil in Dallas is complementary to it or not. But it is the go-to herb, and I mean they use it in Harry Potter. So.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a rock star of magical herbs. It's been around for ages and ages. It was originally referred to as Una, which was the mother of all herbs. And then if you think about Artemisia, that also connects with Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Yeah. And so she was also the goddess of the moon, the daughter of Zeus, a maiden, and so, and very untied to men in that regard, so very freeing. So mugwort is going to bring about strength, psychic powers, protection. It's really good for prophetic dreams or people that are into astral projection. And you can use it as a tonic or a tea. It can also be, apparently, as I was looking online, I guess people smoke it as a hallucinogen.
I have a friend who does.
Oh, okay.
I'd say give a little disclaimer there, warning, to be very, very careful with that.
Yeah. Well, anytime you're inhaling anything, I think you probably need to be careful. What else do we know about it? It can create body heat. Like it's got a warming effect to it.
So that's what's going on. That's what we're having.
Oh, yeah. I was having a warming moment.
That's what it is.
Never happens to older women at all.
Not at all. It's got to be the mugwort.
Exactly. But it's been used both in Chinese history and in European history as warding off properties, as a healing modality, connects with digestion issues and things like that as well. So it's been around for ages. And a couple other plants that I was looking at when I was researching this was mistletoe came up. That's an old druid herb that is good for protection. And we have plenty of mistletoe that grows naturally around here. Hydrangea, if you want a flower, is going to build protection, and so that's often used in borders. And then foxglove, which promotes courage. And so that's going to help balance out your chakra and create protection there. So different things you can kind of add to your garden or add to your herbs at home. The other thing that's kind of interesting about mugwort, so like they also call it St. John's girdle, and because it was believed that when St. John the Baptist was out in the wilderness, he wore it as a girdle for protection, for to connect psychically with God, and to feel safe. So, yeah, so kind of cool.
It smells really good.
Yeah, it does. I got a big whiff of this. So Michelle brought this from her store at Soultopia. So she carries it there along with the stones that we brought in.
So when you burn it, it actually smells really good. And I have had it in tea. Again, used sparingly, very sparingly. But it will, I'm so glad I was excited when you chose this one, because it does protect during those psychic journeys.
Right.
So for readers and people who connect intuitively, or anyone in the audience, just use it very sparingly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But I love it. Yeah. Good. It smells really good. So the black tourmaline with the mugwort would be great things for protection. I wanted to mention too that Roger in our store, that's my husband, one of our most popular things, and I don't always want to do plugs for everything in the store, but I will say we cannot keep it in stock, and I'm going to show you guys. It is this, we have this really cool thing, if you don't mind, just really quickly. It's called our Essence Bar, and he will put oils and crystals just to fill it up, a little bottle or a big bottle, only maybe not even a quarter of the way, okay, maybe a fifth of the way, sixth of the way up. And then you will go and choose a crystal-infused water, distilled water that's been out in the moon or charged in the moon or the sunlight, and you will fill it up with that crystal-infused water. So you can do black tourmaline, you could use rose quartz, shungite, whatever it is you are healing, like malachite. But a lot of people will use for the sage smudge, which this is it, and protection mist. They'll do it. And he puts dragon's blood in this too, that one of the herbs that he uses. And so it smells really, really good. And so this is probably one of the most popular ones. And literally we gripe at him all the time. We're like, we could have sold 10 of these if you'd been in the store. And people actually wear it as perfume and cologne because it smells so good. So it's a great one, because a lot of times we forget to put things in our car. Yep. We forget that we're in our car all the time, so much, depending on where you live. But in Dallas, in our area, if you're in California, you're in the car so much, we forget to put protection in our car.
Yep.
To put crystals or some sort of spray. So it's really good.
Well, and I actually always keep a few crystals in my car just to have something to hold. If I'm stuck in a traffic jam, it just de-stress.
Because another thing for clearing and for protection is, to clear your home or to clear your work area. And I know that some real estate agents have told me that more and more apartment complexes and those type of places, or if you're leasing, will put in the leases now that you can't sage or burn, candles, or you can't sage or you can't burn incense. And so using sprays and crystals are a good thing to do for that protection or for that clearing.
Oh,
too.
absolutely.
Yeah, because apparently they're adding that to a lot of the lease agreements now.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I had a old roommate. She had mentioned her apartment had burned, and then like a few years later, it had kind of dropped it that, it was her that had accidentally burned it, leaving the candles lit. Yeah.
We had that kind of in our store. One of the girls who's a massage therapist, we're not supposed to have candles, and accidentally, fortunately, about an hour later, we went in and we're like, what are these candles? But, got them out really quickly. No more candles in the store. So, yeah, it's tempting though. So why the need, really? We don't want to put fear in people.
No.
But the thing is that anybody who's lived long enough knows that there's duality in the world, okay? You can call it different vibrations. You can call it different frequencies. But when there's light, there's dark. When there's up, there's down.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to have both.
All right. So what would you say about protection but not giving into fear?
Well, there's a fine line there, and I do feel like people reach out. When I get readings, a lot of times they've had a reading and somebody's told them there's like a curse on them. That causes fear. To me, that's a real disservice to do to someone. But there are things that people can do to protect themselves. And I always think of a sheet of white light moving up over them and clearing that off. Mm-hmm. And so I guess, as we talk about protection, we're probably also talking about some of these clearing methods.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand a little bit.
People, you can kind of protect yourself before you go out in the world. Part of it is you need to know where you're at. Like, what are you inviting in? If you're feeling needy, and we all go through those spells where we feel super needy, that means you're probably going to be asking, your body, your energy is asking for help. And so anything can come into that when you're like in that state. So, and psychologically, even if you're in a relationship, if there is a void, you're going to be drawn to whatever it is needs to be filled. And so, spiritually, psychologically, you have to be aware of that.
I would say that for me, it's interesting because you'll always say when you're reading, we don't want to drink. And I think one of the reasons is there's no judgment in someone who, I don't place judgment on people. Well, that's not true. I think we all judge at some point. I try not to, okay? But it's interesting when we say that. One of the reasons we don't do that is because we don't want to open ourselves up to anything untoward, anything that we don't want coming into our auric field, into our space.
Right.
And so the same would go, as you were mentioning, if we're feeling vulnerable. Anytime you are using alcohol or any type of drug, or you're feeling vulnerable in any way. And actually, I'll also mention, I just did a healing on someone not too long ago, and she had felt really just kind of under attack since she had surgery. And when you go under, there's a lot of literature on this, and I don't have to quote right now, but I'll just say globally, there's a lot of literature on this. When you go under, you're not really in control of your subconscious at that point. Okay, so you're under. And so at that point, you could potentially be open to...
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever thought about it? Yeah,
Wow.
So even before you go under, you should really protect, I would say. And if that doesn't resonate with you, that's fine. But it's something to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, because you're completely under.
Oh.
And so, and maybe get a healing, not just for what you had the surgery for, but just to get a clearing afterwards and a healing for that.
Oh,
you know, to
absolutely.
clear any of that out. But I would say that I know personally that I do believe in different vibrations, different frequencies, things that aren't necessarily in alignment with where I'm at. And I know it. People can be Pollyannas and say, oh, everything's perfect and everything's of the light and nothing can bother you. And I know from personal experience in my life that that is not true. That there are things that can. I just have lived it, so I know.
Yeah.
You know, does that mean everybody's going to go through that? No. Did I invite some of that unintentionally in my life and through some of the things that I went through in my life? Yes, I did. Some of it invited, some of it maybe not.
Right.
But I did. I went through some pretty horrific, I would say low vibration times, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
where I probably could have used a lot of these things we're talking about.
Yeah.
Ways to protect. You know, another way they say is to put a bubble of protection around you. These visualization methods of, like you were talking about. You could do it like, you know, in Wicked, when the Glinda the Good in the play, she comes down in the bubble. And so
That's
people
true.
will say, put the bubble around yourself. Your light can go out to others, but nothing can penetrate that bubble or that shield or that hedge of protection. It's interesting because even in the Bible, it talks about put a hedge of protection around yourself. There's also in the Bible, it talks about put on the armor of God. And it goes through all the different pieces of armor that you can put on to protect yourself. You know, it also cracks me up a little bit when people are talking about calling on Michael. Because when you call on Michael, you're calling on a mighty archangel. He has legions of angels with him. So when you're calling on Michael, you're going to be highly protected if you really realize who you're calling on. He is, he comes with like a force, of an army of angels. So if you really can visualize that, that's a lot of protection too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I have to admit, I was more of the Pollyanna theme because I've had bad things happen in my life, but I really cracked it up to it's bad things happen to good people, you know, and that's part of how we roll. I don't necessarily always think that, you know, it's been completely karmic or energetically I failed somewhere. And so, you know, just with my recent experience, I had a person come in that was an extremely powerful dark energy, and I was kind of blown away at first. You know, my first reaction is like, oh, this person's crazy, and then it was like, oh no, this is like real, and energetically I could see that and I could feel that presence, and very, very intelligent person, though, extremely intelligent, and that fascinates me. I have a thing for intellect, and because we're you know, we always want to learn, we always want to grow, and I was like, whoa, this is like Star Wars. Now I get how they get seduced by the dark side, kind of thing, which to me in the movie was never really clear. But I also energetically, like when I read a book and I read about the bad guy, I usually never see them as that dark. And then they make the movie of the book, and I was like, oh, I don't understand why they made them so dark. I just don't go there anymore. And, you know, I had my time in that space where I was, you know, I had to work at a lower vibration, but I was a fighter and I always fought to get out of that. And so this was a tough situation for me, but I did feel like this person eventually was really violating my my psychic privacy and my space, and so I had to do a clear cutoff with him as well as energetically, and so I did a traditional sage burning, which I haven't done in a long time. And cleared the energy with the smoke from that. I also went in and a lesson that I recently learned from Jennifer Waltz, who's a healer here in Dallas. She has you lay down and imagine that you and the other person are facing each other and that there's cords in between you and that you cut the cords. And she said, you know, it can be a sword, scissors, knife, whatever works for you. And so that was something that was extremely powerful for me, was to cut all of those cords, because they were almost like roots in my mind.
Right.
And so, and then I progressively, I felt everything go away. I also followed up with a lot of intense prayers asking for my angels and guides, which had kind of felt really small in this person's presence. And all of a sudden they felt huge and massive. And I feel this sense of an army of white light behind me now. And that's like taken me to a whole new level of confidence in my reading ability, in connecting with other people's reading abilities. And I was like, that was my lesson in meeting this person, was to bring myself to a higher vibration. But sometimes I had to realize how dark that it can go sometimes. So,
yeah. And for me, briefly, I would say the thing that's happened to me recently was after the show, our recording last week, I found myself in the ER. And so I had violated actually one of my own rules, just inadvertently. I had, and this is actually for those of you who work with others and do healings or even readings, or even just are friends with people, and you listen to everything they have to say and you take it on. I had out in my store, there was a precious person. This is really about me, not about the person, because there was nothing that they did wrong, but I felt them, and their energy was very low and not feeling well. And I do healings, and I usually do them in my office, and I just immediately went and got some things to heal this person out in the store. And just said, and the store was crowded, and I said, do you mind if I just do a quick clearing on you? And it involved this person's kidneys. And so it was a couple weeks ago, and then of course I ended up with kidney stones 2 weeks later. And so what I didn't do was I put no protection, and I took on, and it may sound very bizarre to people, but anybody who's done this type of work knows this can happen. I transferred that to myself, and I know that's what happened to me. And I'm still working on clearing that because it was that strong. Actually, when I went back into the store, the day I went back into the store, he was actually there again. And again, he's a wonderful person. I usually don't, not saying who this person is or anything like that. Wonderful, wonderful person. But I took that on. So I didn't put up those protective, like you started off at the top of the show saying it's about boundaries.
Yeah.
And making sure you know your boundaries, making sure you know where you're at that time. Are you checking in with yourself and making sure you are okay and you're strong and what you can handle? And are you keeping to your boundaries?
Yeah. Well, and even if you're not healing someone else, but you're going into your day, you're going into the workspace,
exactly,
into on a date with someone new, boundaries are going to be something that are really important to have. And part of growing up is learning to develop those. In your 20s, you do a lot of those, oops, I'm not doing that again. And a lot of that is from not having those boundaries there. And so you learn to develop them by basically stumbling and tripping through it. That's the good thing about being old, having wrinkles and having boundaries.
Well, yeah,
for the most
learning
part.
New boundaries.
Right. And that's something, we always have to reinvent these things. We're always going to end up with mistakes and have to go back over them.
Yeah.
So.
But fortunately, we have some tools to use and try out different ways. But the biggest thing is to be in touch with yourself, in the sense of knowing yourself and what you can handle. Yeah. Because some people can handle, and I'm going to just say lower vibrations more, and they're called to be around friends like that, in a sense of to help those people. You don't want to just say, I'm never going to at all in my life be around somebody. I'm not going to take their phone call. That friend who always, I call it, vomits on me every time they call. I'll warn you. Okay, Megan, I'm calling you, and just by the way, I'm about to vomit all my problems on you.
Right.
That we call them psychic vampires coming. Just like suck us dry of all our emotional. I'll say, okay, I'm really in a bad place. I'm about to vomit on you. But we don't want to just always cut those people out of our lives
Right.
because they're not always doing that. You know, it may just be one time that they need someone to talk to, but that's when you want to put up that protection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, do we have time for any readings today or question answering?
It
Or
looks
no?
like we're about at the end for today,
Okay.
but we can look at doing that next week for sure.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
well, thank you for joining us.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, and keep third eye thinking.
You're listening to RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.